Hey everybody, welcome to the IAIB Spotlight. I'm Andrew Zarian. If you're watching live, we're recording at a special date and time for our guest. It's a very special guest. I have a connection with our guest because of where we're both from. I'm a guy from Queens, and he's a guy from Queens. He's Iyaz Akhtar from the TWiT Network. How you doing, Iyaz?
I'm doing pretty well. I moved to Queens when I was 3 from Brooklyn. So, but I grew up in Queens for a very long time until I decided to go to school later in Massachusetts.
And you got right out of here. Just took off, headed for the hills.
That's right. The greenery that is Massachusetts, because, you know, Queens is like, well, you know, the city. It's all gray and brown.
Sometimes smells like maple syrup too. I'll tell you. The other day there was a whole thing here in New York. The entire city was covered in maple syrup and the smell of maple syrup from a perfume factory in New Jersey. So it could smell like a lot other things, considering it's New York.
That sounds lovely. Yeah. Lovely. It reminds me of my time in Vermont. Although it was too cold to smell anything then. But yeah.
Iyaz does a bunch of shows on the TWiT Network. Know How. You were also on TNT. A bunch of stuff. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about your how you got started in broadcasting, because you worked for CNET, you were a writer, you went to school to become a lawyer. So it's a lot going on, and I kind of want to figure out like how it came to internet broadcasting. So let's start from the beginning. I mean, I did my homework on you, and you were interested in gaming, and you were interested in technology when you were a young kid. How did that happen? How did that come about?
Well, first, a quick correction. I never worked for CNET. I worked for,
ZDNet. I'm sorry, ZDNet.
Zip Davis, when I worked at PC Mag for a very short time. Your question is, how did I get started in tech?
Yeah.
Or
no. How did you get like, what made you get interested in it?
Well, my dad was a gadget guy. He would he'd bring home all kinds of things. He'd go into these electronic stores and come home with all kinds of gadgets, like his hi-fi, or he'd have his, you know, literally a record player with this awesome equalizer. It had those hundreds and hundreds of little sliders, so you could change everything, all the bass, all the treble, all that stuff right there. Actually, was a great deal of argument between my mom and him. She's like, "You should save money for your kids," and he's like, "I want to buy a toy." So this would go back and forth, and I would frequently, you know, look at these gadgets, and I'd be like, "Hey, Dad, can I go with you to the store?" And so I'd go into these stores, and I would see all kinds of things. Like my favorite toy, like one of the electronic toys, was this Nintendo handheld. It's this clamshell handheld about this big, I want to say. It opened up, and 2 controllers wired came out of it, and you could play like boxing games. Like each one was one game. Like boxing one was like a Mario game. But I was way into those things when I was a kid because I just loved playing with that, because I'd never seen anything like it. And then we had a bunch of gaming systems in my house. My older brother liked Nintendo, so we had that. And one day, the real thing that got me into computers was my younger brother. He bought a Simpsons game from Radio Shack, and he wanted to play it. So he gets home, he opens up the box, and he sees this little diskette, a 1.44 megabyte diskette. And we don't have anything to use this. We have nothing. We have...
What are you going to put it in? Yeah.
Yeah. So we're like, what are we going to do? So what does he do? He convinces my dad to buy a computer.
Can I guess what it was?
Go for it.
A Tandy 2500.
It was a Tandy something or other.
Because that was my first computer. A very similar story to yours, and it's actually frightening how similar it is. My father got a game as a gift for me, and he gave it to me, not realizing what it is. I opened it up, and it was floppy disks, and we went to Radio Shack and bought a 2500 Tandy.
I want to say it's a Tandy 1000. It was like something that predated the Sensation. That was the cool one we got eventually. But we got this thing, and we went home and tried to use it, and we're like, we don't know how to use this. We go back to this store at Radio Shack in Green Acres Mall, by the way, in Valley Stream. In Valley Stream. And the lady at Radio Shack opens up a notebook and writes out every DOS command we ever needed. I swear, this actually happened.
That's almost insane.
Go home and do this. And she wrote it down, and she gave us the book. We went home. Never could install the game, by the way. Never got that game to work. But I learned DOS very, very well. Otherwise, because I think I ended up formatting the disc or something stupid. But like, I don't think I played that game to this day.
You probably didn't.
Should get on that.
You know what's funny? I think they were all advised to do that because we had the same exact thing happen, and we went back to the store and they told us like what to do. And the guy that sold it to us, like, and because we wanted to buy some more games, my father's like, "Oh, let's get this one." He goes, "Listen, give me like $20, and meet me at my car, and I'll give you all the games. And he literally took out like this little box of maybe like 100 floppy disks in there. And he's like, here, $20, I'll give you all these games. He was pirating games.
Well, that definitely seems like maybe that's the way Radio Shack was back then. Now, you're lucky if they know what the heck you're talking about, unless you're talking about a phone. But this is a long time ago, and that's how I learned. That's how I really got into computers. Eventually, we got a Tandy Sensation, which had this. Now that I think about it, a horribly hideous interface. It was this front end for Windows, and everything was covered up, and you'd click these. You had like 8 giant options. And
yeah, WinMate.
That's what it was. Yeah, exactly. And one day I accidentally shut it down, and I didn't know what the heck I was looking at. It turned out it was Program Manager, but I was like, "What's this?" And I started tinkering. I never could get WinMate back. And I didn't care either because I'm like, "Okay, this is Windows 3.1," and I started learning computers back then.
So, I mean, you picked up the interest early on. Like, I've run into a lot of people that do tech coverage, and they're like, yeah, I kind of discovered it in high school or even like in middle school I discovered it. But, I mean, that's early on you picked this up.
Yeah, I was probably somewhere around 10, 11 years old. I mean, when I was a gadget kid, that's around, 5 or 6. But when it comes to computers, I was around 10. So sometime, around grade school, I was very into this, which made me very nerdy because people didn't do that kind of stuff. They didn't bother with computers. But I remember my family was weird because we had email addresses. Like when I was going to high school, it's like, what do you mean you have an email address? I'm like, it was on Prodigy. It's awesome. It's like you can send mail to people all over the world for free. It was just shocking back then.
Did you have a I guess interest in broadcasting or radio at that time when you were younger, or is this something that kind of like you stumbled into and you ended up doing?
There was always an interest in television. I used to watch a lot of TV as a kid, and I always was very interested in behind the scenes stuff. So I never really thought of myself as a performer or somebody who should be in front of a microphone or anything. It was just more I just enjoyed looking at those kinds of programs, talk shows. There was one day, I don't know how old I was. Maybe I was a teenager. I was watching The Tonight Show, and I was like, wait a second. I'm awake at this hour of night to watch that guy talk to that guy. They're both being paid tons of money to talk about a movie. Then I'm going to be paused to watch a commercial because people are paying to broadcast on this basically commercial wrapper. I'm like, this is kind of crazy. So when I was a kid, I decided I was going to do like a little public access show. Me and my brothers shot it. Or my English is terrible there. My brothers and I shot it. And it was...
We're both from Queens. It's all right. We butcher the English language anyway.
We were going to put it on public access, but then one of my brothers was like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do the show with you guys, so forget it. So we never actually put out the show, but it was recorded, and we actually did a 3-camera setup using a bunch of camcorders and a Mad Catz switcher. I mean, it's meant for video games. I've switched that. But that's how we did. Recorded to a VCR, even recorded the audio on a separate track just in case we needed to sync it up. And but that was probably the extent to which I thought, okay, that'd be kind of neat, public access. And then I just let it go. I didn't really care about it performing as a sort or broadcasting. I never thought about that as a kid. It just happened much later on as just a oddity.
So you went to school and then you decided that. What did you go to college for initially? Was it? Did you have an idea like what you wanted to do at that point, or how did that happen for you?
My parents had an idea what they wanted for me. My dad was a doctor.
Okay.
I'm first generation American, and they're from Pakistan. So there's 2 jobs you can have as the son of immigrants. It's doctor or lawyer. So I went to school for biology. I went to Boston University, and I took up biology there, where I ended up having a minor in business, which I really enjoyed. But bio, to me, I got biology just fine. Chemistry, I was just terrible at.
Why biology though? Why did you go for that?
Oh, that was if you were pre-med, that was the way to. Usually, you go with bio.
Okay, so you had decided that at that point. Okay, I'll pick the doctor path.
Yes, I'll pick doctor path because that's the way to go. And so I started looking into that, and I went to school for that. And by the time I found something I really loved, which was physics, I really loved physics. I found that in my 3rd year of school, though. So that really screwed up things. So I wanted to switch majors, but then I'd be in school for another 3 years. So I said, forget that. I'm going to finish up biology, get my business minor while I'm doing this, and then decide what to do after that. Because medical school wasn't something I was interested in. I'm a bit of a spaz, and I don't know if being a surgeon is a great way to go.
Yeah, okay.
I was a surgeon, so I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I want to be like that. And so I wound up what did I end up doing? I ended up deciding in the middle of college that I wanted to do law school. I wanted to be a lawyer instead, because that's option 2. Doctor or lawyer. Doctor is out. I'm going to be a lawyer now. And the fact is, I truly do enjoy problem solving. That's always been the absolute. It's like the thread that's within everything I do. It's problem solving. So I'm trying to figure out what's the thing that binds it. It's this. And law to me was, I took some sociology classes to test to see if I wanted to do law. And
what kind of lawyer did you want to be?
At first, I didn't know. I went to law school at a place called Quinnipiac University in Connecticut, in Wallingford. Actually, no, it's in Hamden, Connecticut. And then I transferred to Vermont Law School because this is going to be weird to say. My wife at the time, she wanted to go to Vermont Law School for environmental law. So I said, okay, I'll transfer out. And so in Vermont Law School, I just it's all big into the environment, and that's not my cup of tea. I'm not a Birkenstock wearing, granola guy. I liked money, and so I took a tax course, and I freaking loved it. I was like, this is the biggest game in the world. It's super exciting. The arguments were incredibly creative. When people want your money, the arguments that come up are so entertaining, and ones that work, you're like, that worked? How did that work? And then the government changes the law. So then they have to do this game of going back and forth. And I'm like, this is really interesting to me, because I liked creative stuff. I loved comic books as a kid. I loved the idea of coming up with these ways of moving money. So I wound up getting interested in tax law, of all things, which most people just roll their eyes and they're just like, oh my gosh, tax law is boring. I'm like, no way. There's money involved, and people are nuts with money.
That's fascinating. So you pick something technical. Like most people are like, oh, I want to be a lawyer, or I want to become a defense attorney, or I want to become a corporate lawyer. Like you went into tax law, which I guess it kind of falls into place with things that you've liked. Like with technology, obviously it's problem solving, right? Like you have to figure out how to do these things, especially early on. So it was always kind of in the same path.
Yeah, law and tax, surprisingly, they do have a bit to do with technology. This is the same kind of problem-solving paths, right? Where you're thinking, how can I have these 6 systems in order together? So it might be statutes that work together in a point where you can figure out how to save the most amount of money, or it could be, like, here's an actual example, looking up in my home office, how can I have all of my video content available on my Media Center PC and my Apple TV and on the web anytime I want? How do I do all of that? It's actually the same kind of rules. You got a bunch of rules for the Apple TV, a bunch of rules for Media Center, a bunch of rules for the web, and then you have limitations like your bandwidth. So it's actually kind of similar in the problem-solving aspect. But yeah, I'm just looking at my Pogo plug. I'm like, okay, hope it doesn't break down again. But yeah, so these kinds of systems are actually somewhat similar. It's working within a set of rules, because no matter what, there are rules. You can bend them all you want. You can map a network drive or something. Well, that doesn't mean it's always going to work, right?
Absolutely. So now you went to school for law. Like, okay, so now let's go beyond that. So how'd you go from law to tech?
Well, actually, they were at the same time. When I was in law school, one of the big things about law is writing, a lot of writing. And I was very much into tech. I'd be reading things like Engadget every day, and I think I had like 20 sites I'd visit every day on the web. And eventually I had my own opinions on tech, and so I decided to write a blog, like on Blogger or something like that, and just a bunch of things I'd write up. And then eventually I saw a gig available as a writer for the Apple blog. This is before GigaOM bought them, and they said, sure, we'll have you aboard. So I started writing for the Apple blog while I was in law school. I just was feeding this tech, lust. I just really enjoyed tech, so I just would write about my opinions on it and things like that. And as I was going through law, I was also doing technology stuff because this was my hobby. I quite enjoyed that. And the weirdest thing is I got into podcasting while studying for the bar exam because I needed a creative outlet. I was studying for probably, I want to say like 80 to 90% of the day. I went to the supermarket. I'd be carrying papers to read while I was pushing around the cart, because that's how intense that exam is. But as a creative outlet, I decided to start a podcast with a friend of mine because I'd heard this show called Return of the Screensavers. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know you could do that. And so I decided, why not record something of my own?
How did you discover it? I mean, because it's interesting, because Leo, obviously at that point, he was a couple of years out of Tech TV. So how did you find it?
Well, I used to watch Tech TV when I used to be a legal assistant, right after college, I had a job for a couple months, and I would come home and watch tech TV, and I would watch these folks talk about technology, and that's kind of neat. So I think after a while, I just started looking around the web, and podcasting was relatively new at the time. And I don't know whether it was like, a Google search for Leo, or if I found it through Dignation or one of these weird turns. I'm not even really sure how I found it, but I did find it, and I heard it. I'm like, this is interesting. And how does RSS work, and lots of these little things. But I'm quite honest, I'm blanking on how or why I was even searching. I know why I was searching for podcasts. I had a 90-mile commute to study. That's what it was. I was living in Vermont, and I had to travel to New Hampshire because that was the only place that did preparation for the New York State bar exam. So I had to drive to Concord, New Hampshire every day, 90 miles to there, and then 90 miles back.
That sounds awful.
It really was.
That sounds so awful.
I needed something to entertain me, so I found podcasts. I would download things to my iPod, and that's how I was paying attention. I used to listen to every show I could find. TWiT, and I found Buzz Out Loud and Daily Gizwiz and all of these things. I'd listen to it every day because 90 miles, even at 60 miles an hour, is a long freaking time.
Oh, it's tremendous. Actually, when I started looking into doing a podcast, my backstory was I got laid off. I sold my business. I got laid off from my IT job, and I was sitting at home and I was bored. And I started looking up like tech podcasts because I always liked technology. And I actually found you doing your podcast, Tech V.
Yeah, we were doing Tech V. That was after law school. So after I graduated law school and I finished up my tax law, I have a master's in tax law, which, where is that? I think it's over there in my office, right? It's just sitting in a pile. Once I finished that, the law jobs, the market for lawyers were pretty horrible when I came out of school. People that were up and experienced were being laid off, and they were up against the graduating classes. So you had this glut of talent in all of these areas, and so these experienced people were taking the entry-level jobs, which were leaving the entry-level people with nothing. And so I wound up getting a job as an editor at a place called Gadgetel.com. I was they didn't have a title, but other than editor, but it was the editor-in-chief effectively. Reviewed all the posts, went to the shows, did all that stuff. And then eventually I decided to leave that because Randall Bennett, who runs Tech V, used to be at CNET. He would have me on as a guest on his show. And I was like, that's kind of neat. He goes, hey, do you want to join me and my company, Tech V, to do a startup? Do you want to be managing editor there? And you have to make video content every day. We get to do this. And by that point, I had done some video podcasts and I've done some audio podcasts, and I kind of wanted to give video a real go. I wanted to see if I could make it in that field. And that's how I wound up at TechV for a couple months before we shut down after a while. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm done with technology. I guess I'm done.
So, but let me backtrack. Like when you started doing like a podcast and you started getting in front of a camera, like what was it like for you? What was the comfort level for you? Were you naturally comfortable just going on and talking about it? Or were you, at first it was a little bit jittery for you?
It was horrible. The first couple times we were on camera, I used to do a show called Killing Time, and it was just an entertainment review podcast. And the idea was eventually we wanted to do like a comedy bit. And like the first comedy thing I wanted to do was an infomercial spoof because I love infomercials. I think they're hilarious. And it's like this one take video of us. It's about 15 minutes, me and my friend Rob. And it's just super fast, and the jokes are there, but they're not developed. And I've watched this stuff back. It's very clunky. And Randall kind of taught me this too. And Ira Glass, if you read this stuff, you got to do a real volume of work before you get any good, because you're going to suck for a very long time. There's nothing wrong with that. But when I first got on camera, I found it terrifying. I used to ask my friend Rob to just could you go behind the camera, just ask me the question, and then I'll answer you, and it'll feel more natural. But to emote to a lens, it was kind of strange because it's just this unblinking piece of glass. And you're just like, well, what do I do? And how am I supposed to act? It took me, I'd say, I don't know, 2-3 years maybe of a lot of work to maybe get a little bit more comfortable with camera. But I was not comfortable performing for a camera. I'm not an actor. I'm not a comedian. I'm just a guy who's got thoughts. And so talking to a camera was very difficult at first.
See, at TWiT, you guys do, live stuff. Are you more comfortable doing a live, almost like a voyeuristic type, video shot, like what we do? I don't really look at the camera. I look at whoever's in my room. I'm looking at, you right now on the screen. Are you more comfortable doing that or like a pre-recorded, like I'm looking at the camera, 3, 2, 1, okay, we're going to talk about the iPhone?
I used to be very comfortable with recording. That was a safety, right? Because when I was doing podcasts, I was the editor. So I would edit out things and I'd see my performance and see what I would do to be better. But Randall beat that out of me. He was like, we're gonna record right to tape. Now it's not live streamed, but it's gonna be right to tape or to SD card or whatever technology you're talking about. He wanted to minimize editing, get the video out as soon as possible. Let's get turnaround very quickly. So at this point, I'm quite comfortable doing the live stuff where it's all extemporaneous. You're just coming up with stuff on the fly. Recordings are nice, but at this point, I almost think of them like Randall did, of the idea of that's a safety net. That's, you're adding time to your production if you're going to do that. So if you can, be really good live, because then editing is a little easier. But I'm recording at this point to me is like a luxury. I love that idea of like, okay, this is nice. I don't know which I prefer, but I'm comfortable doing both, and live seems a little simpler right now.
Do you, for internet broadcast, like what is your opinion? Because right now you do like a talk radio style format. Everything at TWiT is really talk radio, except for Know How. I mean, obviously that's more of a television style show. But what do you think of the talk radio style format? Do you think that's the future of what we're doing, or is it more like a Know How type segment or show?
It's I'm not really sure where the future is, other than the fact. So we had radio to TV, and the first TV shows were really basically radio shows on TV, and then we have TV on the internet, and so now we have not copies, but like it's what would work on TV. Let's put that on the web and see how that goes. So it's just taking the old model and putting it onto a new medium, and what I'm thinking is going to be the real killer, thing, the thing that makes internet television different than regular television, is the fact that internet by its nature is very interactive. It's not necessarily this sit down, chill out, I'm just going to watch and veg. There's a lot of interactivity when it comes to that. So let's say right now, like this lower third here, I could see that being a clickable element. And kind of like there was a company, I think they're still around, they're called Vidler. They had these awesome bookmarks you could have, and then in the actual video, YouTube had deep linking. So instead of making people listen like the old way of TV, right, having a 60-minute block and then you pay attention to these blocks, it's just jump around wherever you want and maybe have some live content on the page that is reflecting that.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the killer thing is. I think it's a combination of everything. The community aspect is, I think, the biggest thing that you can do on the web that you just can't do on TV. And for the most part, that's being replicated by having that second screen experience. Just a lot of people don't want to sit at a desk or a laptop and interact. They want to watch their TV and do that. So I'm not the visionary when it comes to that stuff.
The reason why I ask you this, I had a discussion with someone that's from television, and he actually also has a background in radio. And we were talking about, what works, what kind of format kind of works. And his idea was nobody, and this is a guy that came from, nobody wants to sit and watch a guy with a big microphone in front of him and headphones on. And you know what? I think that's true to an extent. But if you're a fan of radio, obviously when you go online, the next step would be to put a camera in your studio. So I think it's a totally different audience. But what you guys at TWiT are doing is fascinating, because you guys are kind of merging the two, right? It's radio, but it's not. It's traditional broadcasting and traditional video, but it's not. It's kind of merged into this one thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think some shows kind of control the format. So if you're doing a news show, having a big mic in your face isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if you're doing a lot of active things, a microphone's probably a bad idea. You go with the smaller mics, the audio quality dips a bit, because the weird thing about video, I didn't know this when I was a kid, I never noticed this, but the audio quality in television is pretty crappy.
Oh, it's awful, yeah.
but like you don't care because you're getting this visual element and you're being satisfied that way, and you don't even notice it. Obviously, you can sweeten up audio and things that way. But what I'm thinking, it's what show do you want to do? What I mean, I've seen some of the stuff the folks at The Verge are doing, very 60 Minutes style, but it's also modern in some ways. This magazine format thing, I kind of liked what they're doing there. But you can pretty much do anything because you're going to find an audience, because the idea is this is technology. What do you want to see there? What format the shows go, having a big mic or not, I don't know if that makes a difference. It's just, I think no matter what, you can have whatever format. If the quality content isn't there, you're out of luck.
So since I brought up TWiT, let's jump right into that, because I have so many questions I want to ask you about podcasting in general and what you think about where it's headed and everything, which we'll get to. But how did you end up at TWiT? Because right now they are the kingpin of internet broadcasting, especially this type of format. They are the place, and they are producing the most successful content out of all these other internet broadcasting networks. So how do you end up at TWiT? From you're writing, you're playing around with podcasts a little bit, you're doing tech V. So what's that process like, and how do you enter?
Okay, well, this is an odd story. So I'll start at the beginning. When I was an editor at Gadgetel, I was working at home. And while I was working at home, there was a lot of downtime. Actually, it's not true. I was always online looking at my writer's works and things. But I always had another tab open or whatever. I wanted to see the latest news. So I would watch Buzz Out Loud, and they would constantly say, hey, join our chat room, join our chat room, join our chat room. And I'm like, what is that? So I open up the chat room. Back then, there's like 30 people. I kid you not, like 30 people. And so as I would be researching news, I would hear something on the show that I would think was maybe inaccurate or there's more to it. So I'd go into the chat room and write like Ace Detect, blah, 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 this thing, or Molly Wood, blah, 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 blah. And eventually they started citing my stuff on the show. And they'd be like, well, Iyaz in the chat room says this. Iyaz in the chat room says that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. So I kind of got to know the Buzz Out Loud team by being Iyaz in the chat room. And then once I started doing my own podcast, I was working with a guy named Will Harris on Channel Flip. And I had my own show called Channel Flip Web with a friend of mine, Rob. And we wanted to do a parody of one of Tom's shows. So we did a parody of Tom's Top 5, and he actually shot some stuff at the CNET studios in San Francisco, sent us over the video so we could do a parody of it, and it was pretty neat, actually. And then I got to meet Tom, I think like the first time, like at a meetup in New York. And so we became friends. I was terrified because I was like, well, we made fun of everything you do. And he's like, no, I loved it. It was hilarious. Our producer loved it. You stole everything. I'm like, yeah, we did. And I hope you're not mad. Like music and the graphics and like everything we could think of, I could possibly do with my limited editing skills. And they enjoyed it a lot. So I was lucky that way. And an opportunity arose at TWiT where they needed somebody for Tech News Today. They needed like an associate producer and maybe an on-air guy. And so Tom was asked, who would you want? And so he actually said me. But the weird thing is I'd just taken a job at PC Magazine. So I just got that job in November. And this happens around January of the following year. So like I've been at the job for only a couple of months. And they offered me the gig. Like, hey, do you want to be on TWiT? And I was like, yeah. They're like, you have to move out here, though. And I'm like, uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm like, hey, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this because that's what I wanted to do. When I first started podcasting at all, I'm like, I want to work at TWiT. That's the place. And that was the weird thing. Like I said that something like 2006. I'm like, I want to work there. And I somehow ended up here just because I ended up being friends with Tom. And he told me this later on. He goes, your research in the chat room probably said more than any resume could. You were reliable and you were accurate. And that's what we need on the show. And so that's how I wound up at TWiT, thanks to Tom, which was funny because a lot of people the first couple of weeks, they're like, why is this jerk here with Tom? It's like, well, I'm his friend.
I'm his friend. I'm tagging along for the ride.
Yeah, come here. It wasn't like I was installed there. There's no like, so then, okay, I take this person and I put him here. Like that didn't happen.
But I mean, that's an amazing story because it wasn't, you did write for ZDNet and you did do that, but you pretty much got that job because you were a viewer and you were watching it consistently. You were interacting with the group. I mean, that's an amazing story.
Well, Tom told me the same kind of story. He goes, he sent it to me. to me, you remind me of me. He goes, I used to be a guy in the forums back with Tech TV, and that's how he got noticed by Leo. He came in that way. Same is true of my friend at Hot Hardware, Marco Chiappetta. He's like I think a managing editor, or he's up there, really up there. He was another forum member. It's basically the only way you get in is by doing. Like, I was already an editor somewhere else. So the idea is showing you have an interest. That's the hardest thing. That's why I started doing content in the first place, is because to tell somebody, hey, by the way, I want to do this for real, you kind of have to show that you want to do it from the very beginning. And if that means you have a crappy camera and your lighting's no good, but you're making a volume of work, when you start showing people that you really want to do this, they start to believe you, because it's really what you want to do.
Either they think you're insane or they think it's working. I mean, either or.
One of those, yeah. So, I mean, I think insanity is incredibly important for this kind of work.
Do you think it's possible now? I mean, the forums have matured at this point, and you know, when something gets a little big, like Twitter's gigantic, CNET is gigantic. Do you think it's possible now for someone to break through that way?
I think so. I think it's. I mean, connecting with people now is actually, if anything, easier, because you have Twitter and Google Plus and I mean, flat out email if you wanted to use that, chat rooms. I know I've ended up with friends on Twitter. This isn't like professional friends. I just would interact with people. I'd say something about. There's a friend of mine named Tom Gerke. He's on Twitter. I think I got to know him through either Google Plus or Twitter. I can't remember which one. But anytime I would talk about fitness, he would always have something to say, and I just found his ideas intriguing and interesting. So we just started talking back and forth to the point where I followed him, which is weird because I only follow like 150 people. I don't follow a lot of people on Twitter. But I think there's a way to connect with people. If you're genuine and you actually care, that'll do it. But if you're just trying to fake your way through it, that's a whole other. Politicking is a whole other issue.
And it's a major issue. I mean, that definitely exists in the long run. But initially getting discovered, I think that it's amazing, and I think that's a really great story that you got discovered based on you being a viewer and listener in a chat room. That's unbelievable to me. So now you go to TWiT. I mean, they are the big guys. They are the ones that conversion from the cottage to the brick house. I mean, that had to have been some experience and really educational for someone that's kind of getting involved in the business to see how everything is built, right?
Yeah. I got to be at the cottage I started in March and we moved in July. So I was one of the last new hires before we moved over there. So I got to see the cottage and I got to work in there and then wait in the kitchen before we could get into the studio, which was kind of funny back then compared to now. And so we'd walk down the street to the studio to see and test lighting, and then I was just floored because I saw the plans and by Roger Ambrose, who did the set for the screensavers and a lot of Tech TV things, and I was just like, this is insane. There's no way this can actually exist in a place. So then as I'd come in and they'd keep adding more pieces in, I was just like, oh wow, you can put these giant scaffolds up. Oh, that's kind of neat. Oh, you can have curved metal things here. You have is that a brick wall that you just put? Okay, that's cool. So all these things were being added in, and then I was just enjoying the fact that this thing existed because I'd never seen anything like that. It just coming to work every day and going into this place that looks like you've seen it online. It's insane. You like my desk is what you see on Tech News Today. So it's just kind of like, wow, I had no idea what they could do on the back end. The small things, actually, the technical stuff, I was very interested in. Like, how are we setting it up? The video cameras and the switchers, the TD station, the audio over Ethernet, which I'm like, why didn't I think of audio over Ethernet? Of course, that's a thing.
By the way, I can never go back to a regular, console and analog setup for my audio too. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant, the IP audio system.
Yeah, right now for this thing I'm running an actual old school mixer, but but to see what they've got at TWiT, it's kind of like seeing if you had to redefine or redesign entirely what a studio could be, they did it. It's like, that's intriguing. So I know I've had my own studios like in my basements and things, and trying to cobble together things, and a lot that maker spirit, as it were, does exist at TWiT as well. So it's kind of like, whoa, okay, so they came up with this. That's cool. You could use a Blackmagic Intensity converter box to get a lot of the video in. Like that works too. Just at least, like I hadn't heard of half of these I wouldn't say they are professional devices, but some of them like straddle the line on pricing, which I'd never seen anything like that. So it opened up my eyes a bit.
Initially, when you went to TWiT, was your position going to be on air, or were you going to be like a producer of the show?
I was going to be a producer / on air only a couple of days a week. And then that got bumped. I think it was like going to be 3. And that got bumped to 4. And then eventually I got it on every day. I'm not really sure how that happened. How did that happen? I don't know. I was helping I remember my first day there, I wasn't on air. Either it was a Monday or whatever the 28th of March was 2 or 3 years ago or so. Darren was on, and that was the other thing. That's right. The studio had a physical limitation. So if they had somebody else coming in, I would be just playing producer role and be all set. So I was going to be on only a couple of days a week, and then somehow got onto every day. How did that happen? I couldn't even tell you. It's not even like a secret. I think I was just there, and so there you go.
That's amazing. I want to talk to you about podcasting a little bit and where you think the future of podcasting is headed and internet broadcasting. It's become somewhat mainstream now that you have people like Adam Carolla and every radio show now, I mean, has a podcast form to their broadcast. Where do you see the evolution headed? How do you see it changing over the next couple of years? Because this is the Wild West technically. I mean, it's still the infancy of the technology and the broadcasting ability of what we're doing. How do you see it changing over time? Is it going to stick to this type of format? Are we going to use iTunes as the main distribution, or do you think it's just going to totally evolve over the next couple of years?
I'm trying to figure that. It's a great question. I'm trying to figure out how exactly this stuff will all suss out. Podcasts and what's technically a podcast is kind of strange. I remember when you start off before iTunes supported podcasts. You'd have to find these other directories. You had to find where to get these different shows, and then eventually iTunes did support it, and so they become somewhat of almost a front end for people to find programming. And you do have all of these majorly huge companies producing what they call podcasts, but a lot of them they're effectively like pilots, or they're other shows, or they're just the weird thing. I think about a podcast as this actual media. It's a show that exists only on the web, and these podcasts are acting like supplements to other media, other TV shows, and behind the scenes things, which is cool as well. But it seems like it broadened the scope, because it used to be, this is the show we have and it's on the web and you can download it this way. Now it's like we are up against like Sesame Street. That was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Like when Know How came out on TWiT and it was up against Sesame Street in like the top 10. Like
Sesame Street. Yeah.
Sesame Street. Like I love Sesame Street, but like this is not something you ever think about. But I'm thinking in the long run, I think everything's gonna get ended up like married together with IPTV. I really think that's the future.
But do you think that's a good thing?
I think it has to be a good thing, quite honestly, because I think the quality content will remain. You'll have dedicated viewers. I think that's actually the most intriguing thing. Like I remember when the Golf Channel came out. You remember this Golf Channel? Like who was going to watch golf?
Who's going to watch golf? Yeah.
All day, every day. The History Channel. Who's going to watch this all day, every day? We might get even more insular, but the idea is these channels could be more crafted with things like Switch Digital Video, where you could be like, okay, I just want to watch woodworking all day, or I want to know more about building technology, just building a server. I'm sure we're going to have such a mass of content. The real thing I'm hoping is that something can find this content like through the web or through your television, because otherwise it's just like a sea of content. And the worst thing so far I found is discovery is very difficult to happen, because if you wanted to watch a show like Know How, or you want to Tech News Today,
where do you really find it?
Yeah, how do you find it? You do a Google search. Google famously is terrible at searching through videos. YouTube is trying to have those custom, the automatic captioning, so you can kind of hear what's going on and you can search through the words, but that's not 100% accurate. So it's finding the content. So if I can be able to say, listen, I want to watch just But I just want to watch the business side of technology. So like a CNBC that's only about tech giants. I think in the future we will be able to say and call, like, create your own network kind of concept and have the programming coming to you. I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing, but I think it will allow for really dedicated audiences.
No, you're absolutely right. Content discoverability is the biggest challenge that we face. iTunes is great at it, but I think with more and more mainstream content coming on board, it's going to get a little bit more difficult for. I even think, like, for someone like you doing at TWiT, it becomes a little bit more difficult because there's other guys that kind of get top billing, right? I mean, they kind of like to go based on name recognition, and it happens. TWiT right now, I mean, they're the giant ones, so it might not be a good example, but you're right. I mean, even with if someone comes to me and they say, "Listen, Andrew, I do a show on TV. Oh, what do you do? I do this show." I could find it on my television. If you go to someone and you say, someone says, "What do you do?" He goes, "Oh, I do a show called Know How. It's about anything from creating a Hackintosh to whatever, fixing your laptop screen." Where does someone find that? Oh, well, you go to live.twit.tv and then you click on shows and then you click on the you find it there. I still think it's difficult for some people, for regular people, to do it. I even think with the audio side, it's difficult. Like in the car, if I'm streaming live 24/7, someone has to know exactly where I am and what show is on in order to find me.
Even if you go to like a broadcast network, like let's say CBS, and you want to find one of the shows they have in prime time, you go into CBS.com is gigantic. You hit shows, and that thing opens up gigantic. So even with a network, it becomes somewhat unwieldy. So if somebody can figure out how to do a search properly or something like that with video content, it'd be great. But it's just a new kind of, it's a new world when it comes to that, because now that anybody and everybody can make a video show, that changes things. And so now you have the the cream rising to the top, and you've got like Sesame Street, you've got NBC podcasts, and you've got major league players that will do one-off shows, like if they're promoting a movie and they have like behind the scenes thing, or those things really. I don't think they hurt podcasting in general. What they do is they do bring attention and they tell you how to get them. But it's not. We're talking about this. It seems like UI and discoverability might be more important for the content makers. If anything, UI is important because if you can't find something on a webpage, it's not built right. It's just that's a whole other ball of wax.
I was talking to my mother-in-law the other day about this, and she goes, Andrew, I always want to listen to you, but I can't find it. Where do I find it? Like, if I'm driving, what do I do? I'm like, oh, it's easy. And that was my biggest mistake. When I said it's easy, I slowly realized how difficult it is to find something. So I'm like, okay, you got to download an app. Do you have Stitcher? She goes, no, I don't have Stitcher. I'm like, do you have TuneIn? No, I don't have TuneIn. Okay, go and download Stitcher. Okay, I downloaded Stitcher. Now, she's like, it's asking me for a password. I'm like, okay, register your email, put in a password, go to your email, confirm that it's you. Now go to it, put in my show name. Is it GFQ? Yeah, GFQ. Okay, now I found it. Which one are you on? Okay, go to live feed, click on the live, and then you could play it. Now you got to sync your Bluetooth with your phone. It's like a 15-minute ordeal. All this person wanted to do was just turn it on at that moment.
And that's why I'm pro Android, because either you can make your own app or a shortcut or something, or an automator. Like, I'm gonna just give me the device. I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna set up this thing that at 3 o'clock it will turn on. And it will do this for you, because that's actually one of the things this is one of the bigger things that got me into tech, is like, I want things to work almost automatically because of that process. That was nuts. Like when I used to watch a bunch of CNET shows at home, what I would do is I had a Mac Mini hooked up to the TV. I had an automator script connected to my iCal, so that, let's say I wanted to watch Buzz Out Loud, it would automatically open the page. The mouse would then move, click the full screen button, so that when I decided to watch it, it'd be there. Because the interface is built for websites. Yeah. It's not built for consumption as easily as a television. TV's like, turn it on, channel 35 at 3 o'clock, done. But scripts might work, but that's a whole other set of nerdery.
It's really insane. I'm always curious on what's going to be the fix. How are they going to fix this problem? I think Ford just bought Livio, which is like a tune-in type service, and Stitcher has all these deals. But I don't think anybody's doing it right. especially in the car right now. I don't think anybody has figured out that formula that makes it, oh, okay, it's like radio. You just put on channel 1 and there it is. Maybe it's going to require like a CBS or a Fox to kind of say like, okay, we like these shows, so we're going to have a show every hour, and then we're going to start categorizing it based on technology and whatever. Maybe someone like that will have to do it, but right now it's still extremely difficult. But for video, I mean, I guess video is even more behind than audio is, right? And people are just catching up to live video streaming.
Well, yeah, it kind of reminds me of the thing. Didn't Current try to do that, where they would take video content and just basically make half-hour blocks out of them? I want to say that happened, but this is before they got bought recently.
That is what they did, yeah.
So like it's by putting it on the cable systems, by having a sort of public access version or having a show that uses other shows and clips, maybe that's the way to go. But to set up programming, see the thing, podcasts are like on-demand programming. So you kind of have to want to know what you want to watch when you do on-demand. It's kind of hard to have discovery unless maybe it's in like a Netflix thing or Hulu. I always thought Hulu was actually pretty good at this, where you could have a bunch of content, regular television shows, and then you could have suggestions that way. The suggestions might help with discoverability. And Hulu actually made it somewhat easy for people to understand how to find online video in one location as a YouTube competitor. YouTube has a whole set of other issues when it comes to search and just feature. I think it lags in features at times compared to a lot of the other smaller companies that were out there.
In what way?
Well, YouTube was really slow to adopt HD. That was one of the first things. It's one of the reasons why my independent podcasts were at Blip or Vimeo for so long. I want to say they removed the ability to download videos directly. That used to be a thing you could do. That's gone. So if I wanted to host a podcast there, it's not a podcast. It's a streaming video show that you can run on YouTube. Buffering systems drive me insane. I do like their ad system where you can have to skip the ad, but I think their player itself is just it's wretched.
Well, I think they ruined it with that new with the new button that they've added. Where before, before, if you clicked on the gear, it was listening, and now it's like in a box after you click on it.
To find that, yeah, you're talking about changing the video quality, right? Like now it's like 3 or 4 clicks in, and that obscured some UI that I think is a little bit silly. I see what YouTube's trying to do. They're trying to keep it dead simple to get more content on there, but I don't think they appeal to power users like Blip used to or Vimeo does. It's just a different. They have different goals, obviously.
I even think discoverability on YouTube has kind of changed. When they did that changeover on their main interface on their main site, I think it hurt a lot of their regulars, their YouTubers that were being featured on the front page, and it would kind of show you like, okay, these are the top people because they're the most watched. Now it's a little convoluted and it's set up based on your liking, but if you're not logged into Google, really, how does it know what I'm liking? It's just scattered, really. I think the biggest pro to being on YouTube for many people were, discoverability. Everybody's on there. People are searching every kind of term on there, and you get found. But now I realize that that's not really happening anymore. Like if I put in tech podcast on YouTube, the odds of me being discovered are less than they were about 2 years ago. So really, you could go to other services like a Daily Motion or even like a Vimeo and get kind of control over what you're doing. Well,
I think YouTube right now, like you're mentioning, when you're signed in, it might aid in discovering things you want to watch on YouTube. Like me, it's constantly saying, here's the full wrestling match, which should be taken down because of copyright issues, but they're still there. They're showing me all these things that I might actually watch on YouTube. So if anything, I might spend more time there. I might not be discovering anything new, but as a recommendation engine, it's kind of doing that. I think YouTube's trying to do a lot of things at once, but being the default destination for online video, that's a tall order. Right?
So let me take back everything I just said and sound like a total hypocrite because I just put in tech podcast and I'm the first one that comes up.
Are you signed in?
No, I'm not signed in.
Let me do it with an incognito window. YouTube tech.
That's interesting.
So maybe they're hearing you right now. Yeah, your top's right here. So
that's hysterical. So YouTube just totally threw my argument out of the window.
So it totally works.
Yeah, it does work. I take back everything I just said. When you put in tech podcast, you will show up. That's actually brilliantly funny. But Before we wrap up, I want to ask you about, what kind of format works as far as a podcast goes. We got on the IAIB, we have a couple. I think it's a little over 1,000 members right now on the forum. We have a couple hundred people that are active on there. And I hear the stories from people. And, when I was at New Media Expo last year, people came up and they go, "Hey, Andrew, I've been doing a podcast for about 3 years now, and I can't break over 100 viewers, and I do this and I do that, and I can't break over that." Or I don't know how to respond to that. And I always use that as an example. Like, how do you respond to someone that's saying, like, "I'm trying everything and I can't break over this certain point. What am I doing wrong?" I don't know what to say to them. So I'm asking you, when someone comes to you and says, "I've been doing a podcast for a couple months. I have, the setup is pretty good. The content is pretty good, but they just can't break through." I mean, it's nothing that they're doing wrong. It just, for whatever reason, they can't break through. What do you recommend to them? What do you tell them, try this or try that?
Well, assuming they have they're pretty resilient as a human being. If I'm going to be brutally honest with them, it's going to be like, okay, well, that's fine. Do you really want to do this? If they really want to do this and they can't break 100 right away, that's not going to be deterrent. If they're stuck for a while, it's effectively going in and doing this kind of content day in and day out, or week in and week out, building that content. And what you're going to do is, if you're not actually watching back your content, this is something, by the way, I used to hate doing. I still do actually hate doing this. Watching back your own content, because I was my own editor. I would edit my own shows. And you would learn to be, you got to take your ego and put it aside. You have to be able to take your content, show it to somebody who knows nothing about it, and then find out what they think about it. Because if it's just your friends and family patting you on the back, that's great, but that's not going to necessarily translate to a successful program, right? You want to have quality content, and you got to build a thick skin. There's going to be things that you can do to improve, and there are technical things. I wouldn't say like throw money at the problem. Like, maybe your audio is not very good. Maybe your video quality. Maybe your lighting. Those are very important. But I always think that quality content reigns no matter what. That stuff will find an audience. And on the practical side, if it is lighting, if it's crappy audio, let's take a look at that. But if it's maybe it's just socially, you have to get it out there. Some people are afraid to have themselves associated with their own show. I remember when I first started, I didn't use my full name. I didn't use that. I was just IA on a podcast and audio, because I don't know where it was going. I had no idea. So if you're willing to put yourself out there, and it's going to hurt, by the way, you put yourself out there, somebody's going to smack you around, but that's going to take a while to get over 100. So it's do you have the drive to keep doing this? Are you willing to be critical about your own work? Are you willing to take the hit, because people will criticize you? And you just have to look for the constructive criticism there. What can you do to make it better? And if they're willing to do it, their content will show up. It will break 100. It just needs, everything takes a lot of time. It's weird to say as an internet person, because, internet stuff's supposed to be super fast, but it takes a long time. I've been in this business since, 7, 8 years now. To some people, if they've watched TWiT, they're like, "Oh, you just showed up like 2 years ago." It's like, no, I've been doing this for a while.
Doing it for a while, yeah.
It's like but I've done a lot of bad content. Trust me, and I've had a lot of videos that did like 4 hits.
But that's the amazing thing about this. You can make a mistake, and you can do bad content. And you know what? If nobody's watching and nobody saw it,
that exactly. Like there's this silly saying I read every now and then. It's like, why not you? If you want to do this thing, like if you want to be, you want to do internet video, or if you want to do content and you want to broadcast, like, why not you? Like, what is it going to take for you to make this happen? There's this Penn and Teller thing about, I was reading, I think it was an interview with Penn Jillette. And he said something like, never take a job that isn't what you want to do. So if you want to be a magician, don't be a waiter who does magic. Be a magician. Randall was also the same way. He goes, if you're going to go do this, never take a job that's not in that field. So if you really want this, it's scary. Like, you got to go out there, and you might have some lean months and lean years to do it, but like, it's being a broadcaster for real is not like, it's not like you can just apply for a job and they're like, "Oh yeah, well, you qualify, so here you go. Here's the career." It's risky. It's crazy. But like, if you're dedicated enough, it happens. It happens.
I always tell people, I'm like, you know what? Try to look at what everybody else is doing and try to do something a little different. I think with technology, there's 1,000 tech blogs out there, but tech podcasts out there, but the ones that are successful at it are offering something. It doesn't have to be a gigantic difference, but it's something slightly different. ZDNet and CNET are able to cover, and Engadget and Verge are able to cover the tech news. So offer something a little bit different than just offering the tech news. Offer personality. What you guys do at TWiT, every show has a personality to it, and there's a connection amongst the hosts. One of the most successful podcasts I've ever seen has been this very niche show about, just nonsense, about, woodwork or plastics or something like that. Those are very successful shows that I've noticed, and it's because they're offering something that's different than everything else. So I always tell people, go in a different direction. I mean, add personality. I want to start doing a tech show with just clown makeup on. I think that'll work.
That's one way to put it. The other thing I say to people is make content you want to see. Because sometimes if you try to please everybody, like, I think people want to see a tech podcast with clown makeup. I really think there's nobody's ever done that. I'm going to go do that. But do you want to do that? Because if you're going to do it because you want to, that's cool. But like if somebody's out there and is like, that's a good idea, I'm going to steal it, I'm going to do it. If you want, like I did this show and I'm going to bring it back actually. It's about dinosaur news. All of these like discoveries about dinosaurs that keep happening. The past 20 years, our pictures of dinosaurs have changed.
Now, I'm assuming you like dinosaurs.
I do like dinosaurs. Okay. All I wanted to do years ago when I started this podcast, I just wanted to watch a podcast that told me about the latest discoveries in dinosaur news. So, like, did the T-Rex posture change? T-Rexes used to stand like this in like every museum, and then they leaned them over because biologically it made no sense.
I just read something that a lot of the dinosaurs were covered in feathers.
Feathers, right? When we were kids, they weren't covered in feathers. It was scaly monsters that would come after everybody. Then, like, wait a minute, they are cold-blooded, so they're not randomly going to kill things because they have to conserve energy. Then the feather aspect changes things. So there's all these discoveries. All I wanted to do was watch that show, and it didn't exist. And so I started to do that show, and it did okay, decent viewers and decent numbers. I wasn't looking to fill a niche. I just wanted to watch that program. I'm probably going to bring it back. I'm like looking at the calendar. It's coming soon again. But it's just something I like to do. So if that's another thing I'm telling people. It's make a show you want to watch, because that you're probably not the only person who doesn't that misses this show. I want to watch a dinosaur show. It doesn't exist. So maybe now 20 people are watching this are going to be like, I'm doing a dinosaur show.
Yeah. But do you think something like that you can monetize on it? I mean, monetizing in podcasting is very difficult. And, I'm not talking about affiliate programs. I'm talking about making some money from it. I tell people all the time, do it because you enjoy it, not because you want to make money. If you have an audience, the money will come eventually. But how likely would it be for something that niche to be, profitable?
That kind of thing, that's almost like a public service show. It's kind of like what would you call it? Like a PBS style show, really. That kind of stuff. And I think about how PBS makes money. They have grants, and I'm thinking a lot of these niche shows, not a word, more niche shows.
We could use it. Don't worry about it.
That's the title there. If we were titling based on that, but yeah, these niche shows, I think arguably they have like Kickstarter legs or Indiegogo legs, where you have to say, look, I want to do this show as a labor of love. I'd like to make some money on it. You don't ask for much, and you say, this is the way it's going to go. And that's the kind of way those shows would exist. But mainstream shows that appeal to the masses, they're going to find the audience. And arguably, if you have an engaged enough audience, you could probably try to take that to advertisers and say, hey, would you want to sponsor this show? I know when I was an independent person and trying to get sponsors on the dinosaur show, it was impossible. I bet it's still impossible, actually. But you got to try. It's as simple as that. You could try to find somebody who's going to be the right fit, but it's going to be very hard.
Excellent. As we're out of time, it's been an hour. It went by really quickly. I'd love to have you on again and talk more about this stuff, because there's a lot to talk about with podcasting, and especially you, because you've been around, internet broadcasting for a while now. You've been doing it. So it's always great to talk to someone that is working through it, and you've kind of you're working for one of the big guys now, so your point of view is a little different than someone that's up and coming. So it's always great. Iyaz does a number of shows on the TWiT Network. You go to twit.tv, check out everything he's doing. He's doing Know How tomorrow. What time is it on tomorrow?
Tomorrow it's at 3 o'clock Pacific. Tomorrow I'm getting to mess with my I call it a podcasting rig. It's more about a video shooting rig. It's a very portable one. Back when I was a reporter, I would always run around these trade shows. And so I always wanted to figure out the quickest way to get that content on the web as soon as possible. So I'm going to be building something. I think I'm using an iPhone and a Steadicam and other stuff. So that's Know How tomorrow. And I think Father Robert's got something awesome planned too. So we've got our show there. Tech News Today, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Pacific. And then I'm also hosting Windows Weekly tomorrow.
With my good friend Paul.
With Paul Thurrott, Mary Jo Foley at 11 o'clock Pacific. So it's going to be a very full day tomorrow.
Have you gone out drinking with MJ and Paul?
Yes, I have.
MJ could drink all of us. She's unbelievable. She's a pro.
She's got a palate, and she's from New York, so she can handle it.
She definitely can. For all things Twit, go to twit.tv. Check it out there. Also, if you miss any portion of the show, of course, you can go to our website, ibroadcastnetwork.org. For the IAIB, we have a phenomenal forum there if you're looking to get into podcasting, or you are into podcasting and internet broadcasting, and you're looking to join the community, talk to other people, get advice. You have questions. When I started, I knew nothing about this. I was literally standing here with an awful camera in front of me and trying to hook up an XLR microphone to a 1/4-inch jack. So I was out of my mind. If it wasn't for the IAIB, if there was an IAIB, I would have definitely saved some time and money in my setup. So ibroadcastnetwork.org, IAIB forum, obviously. And, of course, you can subscribe to this. We're on iTunes. We're everywhere podcasts are available. We're going to be re-airing this. If you're watching this live, we're going to be re-airing this on Friday at the regular scheduled time. And, of course, we're going to be putting it out on podcast form, audio and video on Friday as well. And we'll be back next week, guys. So take care, and we'll see you all then.